Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the HeartStream Musings podcast. I'm so excited for this episode. Today, we have another special guest. Her name is Sarah Cohan, and she and I actually know each other from a different community, and I just love all of the content that she's been putting out. And so Sarah is an attachment coach and the hilarious host of the Lit as Fuck podcast. She offers one-on-one coaching to folks that struggle with people pleasing and vulnerability to create secure relationships where they are confident to be themselves. How could I not have her on this podcast? I think a lot of you all will really resonate with the work that she's putting out there, especially on how to have secure relationships. Where do you even start? And so I'm super excited to bring her on here and just share more of her journey. So welcome to the HeartStream Musings podcast, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. It is such an honor to be here. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So how did you even get into becoming an attachment coach? I think that's such a specific niche. And would love to hear the journey and how it even began.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Let's go back to the beginning. So you and I know, is it okay if we talk about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So you and I know each other through the To Be Magnetic San Francisco local group, which is amazing. So To Be Magnetic is a manifestation program developed by Lacey Phillips. It's an incredible, powerful program. And on February 14th, 2020, I gifted myself a membership to that program I was like building a business, but in my early 30s and just feeling like I really wasn't satisfied with life. Like I kind of felt like I was having a midlife crisis, but in my early 30s. So probably a little bit of like the Saturn return. Like I think my Saturn return happened when I was 28, and then there's supposed to be like a shadow that comes back later.
Oh, I didn't know that. What's it called?
Yeah, I think it's literally called the shadow, but or the Saturn return shadow, or like maybe it's like a retrograde. I don't know. I haven't looked at my charts or anything, but it was a really palpable time in my life where I just thought, all my friends, I was comparing myself to everyone else. So I was like, all my friends have houses and they're starting to have kids, and what the fuck do I want? Like I'm not getting what I want, and I don't understand why. So I was doing the To Be Magnetic program, and it's an incredible program. Like, I think the work that Lacey has done is amazing. And through that program, I learned about attachment styles. So she talks a lot about attachment styles in her work. And I was just kept thinking like, she keeps coming back to this. And every time she talks about it, I feel like I really resonate with it. So there was a fellow member in this group that we're in, Rachel Besser, who's a shadow work coach. And
yes,
she's amazing. She recommended the personal development school as a way to just start to heal my attachment style. And I feel like I went from like for Lacey's work, what I would do every single night is like journal for like literally, I would take a bath, meditate, and then journal for 2 hours doing a module. And that was like my program for like most of 2020. Like as soon as the pandemic hit, I was just like, we are diving into me. Like we are getting to know me. And so I was doing all this manifestation work, and I felt like I was kind of like scratching the surface and doing some work, but I really wasn't seeing a whole lot of traction. And everyone else in the program was like, oh, look at what I manifested. And isn't this so cool? And I was just like, it's taking a long time.
You're like, why am I different?
Yeah.
Like, do I need a journal for 3 hours?
Yeah. Like how many more hours in the day can I like really work these out? And so I just like kind of thought like, and everyone was like, well, you just have really big manifestations. Cause there was a lot of like, I want a new career, like that kind of stuff. And as soon as I started doing personal development school to heal my attachment style, that's when a lot of things changed and a lot of things just started coming through. And I was able to get to understand why I had such this like internal chaotic baseline. Like I just felt like I always had really high emotions, and I was triggered by a lot of things, but I was so scared to let my emotions out because when I was growing up, that just was not safe. It was not allowed. And so I felt like all of a sudden I really understood why I was the way I was and a path to change it. So it wasn't just like, great, now I'm defective. Instead, it was like, no, here are some like real tools that you can use in your every single day life to start to become secure. And so after I started that journey, I was hosting a podcast at the same time called Lit AF.
Mhm.
And I was interviewing a lot of just leaders in the personal development and personal growth field. It was a lot of spiritual leaders. And I was surrounding myself by coaches in my own healing journey and then on my podcast. And I was just immersing myself in like this kind of new way of living, of like being
Mhm.
really open to myself, being really spiritual, and befriending myself. Like it really was like, I've heard you talk about self-love all the time. I told everyone I was in a romance with myself. It was
That's
incredible.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. And so when you were in this school, and it's kind of interesting, right? It's like you followed the breadcrumbs
Yes.
of, oh, I'm going to try. How did you first hear about TBM? Because I first heard about it in a podcast.
My friend, so I remember this so distinctly. I was on a road trip with my girlfriends to Big
Yeah.
Sur, and I was complaining about money, and I was just like, I'm sure my friend heard what I was saying about money, because my views on money were like so warped.
Uh-huh.
That she was like, I think you should check out this podcast. And then she just sent me a link to one of the episodes from Lacey. And it was an episode where Lacey was like, it was on the expanded podcast, but it was her guesting on another podcast. So it really was like the basics of Lacey talking about her program. And I just thought it opened something up in me that was just like, this is what I've been wanting. And I was like, it was like I was beyond famished to turn to this like spiritual, like emotionally vulnerable channel. And so once I started, I never looked back.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so like you were following the breadcrumb, you found out the podcast, you dove deep into the program, you had this almost devotional practice of like every night, meditate, bathtub, journal for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then Rachel led you to the personal development attachments. And then you that's just when it started hitting and you realized like, oh, wow. Like what did you identify with as your attachment style?
Yeah. So, and I can go into the different attachment types later for anyone that doesn't know them, but my attachment style at the time was fearful, avoidant, leaning, dismissive, avoidant. So that meant, yeah. So fearful avoidant is kind of in between the two main attachment styles. So there's anxious preoccupied. The attachment styles is basically, it's a system to understand how we related to our caregivers in our childhood, and therefore how we relate to lovers, friends, bosses, teachers, any relationship that you have as an adult, kids. And that helps you understand how you relate to others around you. And so the anxious preoccupied attachment style is very much like outward energy. So they're really driven towards relationships with others. They prioritize relationships above all else. So they tend to people please, not share needs, because they want to keep that connection really close. They expect other people to help them soothe when they are triggered. And so on the opposite side of that is the dismissive avoidant. And the dismissive avoidant is really driven inward. So they want to soothe on them by themselves. They really want space. A lot of people describe them as like a lonely island. And they expect that actually people should soothe by themselves and then come back and never kind of talk about what happened, because conflict is so scary to them. It's overwhelming. It's it's unsafe. They have big fears of being unsafe. So in the middle of these two attachment styles is the fearful avoidant attachment style. And this attachment style flips between the two. And what happens is the fearful avoidant often grew up just like in a chaotic household. Hi, me. And so what happens is they have this like hot and cold relationship with people. So they really want romance. And then as soon as you get close to them, they're like, get away. This is too much. I can't trust you. And so this shows up when I looked at it, I was like, oh, I can see this in every area of my life. Like all of a sudden I was looking back at bosses that I've had and I was just like, dang yeah. Like I wanted them so bad to be this like leader and almost like a parent figure in my life.
Right.
And then as soon as like they were either too close or there's signs of like something might not be perfect, then all of a sudden I was just like, it's like, this isn't working. This is the worst. I can't we have to get this away. So it's a very hot and cold relationship. And oftentimes this chaotic kind of emotional baseline that they have can be held internal, like I was talking about earlier. So it's
Right.
not necessarily, they don't feel safe to express it. So they keep it inside, which just
Mhm.
means inside is just like crazy internal chaos. And anytime I would go hang out with people, I would need like 48 hours to recover afterwards. And it was just a lot.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. And so as you started to kind of unpack this and unravel about, okay, this is how it looks like in my life, where did you start? I don't know, I guess maybe testing the different tools that you were learning, what areas?
Yeah, I definitely, the first and always is my relationship with my husband, because so he
Mm,
runs a little bit more anxious, which when we're in relation, like our attachment style can change based on the relationship that we're in. So if
right.
someone is bringing a little bit more of an anxious, preoccupied attachment style to the dynamic, then that can push people more towards the dismissive avoidance side. But in my previous relationship, I was dating a dismissive avoidant. So I was definitely running a little bit more fearful avoidant towards the anxious preoccupied spectrum. So so these tools, I definitely first and foremost apply them to my relationship. And the beauty of it is that a lot of times when I'm working with clients, we're just literally building scripts to like talk to people. So like
Yeah.
figuring out, like workshopping, like, okay, how can I show up in a supportive way that will kind of keep their attachment style not triggered, so like soothed, and then
Mhm,
also share my needs and ask for what I need in this moment. And
mhm.
that's a lot of my work is like, how can we make it fun? So I'm not trying to really pre-plan
Yeah.
my conversations or discussions or even fights with my husband. But what I am trying to do is just be more thoughtful about how I am showing up, how I can show up securely. I should say there's
Mhm.
a fourth attachment type, which is secure. And that's kind of the archetype that we're all trying to head to once we find out about our insecure attachment type. And
Yeah.
secure people just really have, but secure people are comfortable with their emotions. They feel safe to share them. They understand the give and take of any relationship. They're quick to repair. So anytime that
Mhm,
there's a disagreement or an argument, they're trying to quickly figure out, okay, how can we repair from this? And repair
mhm.
doesn't mean that we all have to apologize or that we have to have this huge discussion. Repair can just mean like, I'm going to treat you like you're a person in my life that I really care about and that we're still in this marriage together.
Mm,
Like
mhm.
Esther Perel just had this really great interview where she said, she was talking about repair, and she was like, repair just means like after you finish tearing each other apart, that you're like, hey, can you pass me the bread basket? Because I'm hungry. Like you're just like bringing it back to like, hey, we're still gonna be in a relationship. Like, I hope that's cool with you.
Yeah, yeah. And so have you ever met anyone that was secure or ever dated anyone that was
Oh,
secure?
yes. So,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
so after I did all this work, I decided I needed to go back and get a job, and I worked for a tech startup here in San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
It was the most secure job environment I have ever been in. It was the most secure environment I've ever been in my entire life. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Uh-huh.
mostly men. It was like mostly men in their 20s, but they were literally just as I described. They were so in touch with their emotions. They were so comfortable sharing them. They didn't make any
Wow.
meaning out of it. They encouraged me to share my voice no matter how difficult it was for me. They yeah, they just like they had this like such a solid baseline, which was
Wow.
such a healing experience for me, because in the past, because of my subconscious comfort zone, which means this internal chaos baseline that I'm like used to, I was
Right.
finding jobs that really were matching that. And
Mm, mhm.
like whether that meant like how my boss was showing up, or how the team was showing up, or just like the work ethic that was there. So it was really an incredible experience.
Yeah. Do you think it was more about the culture that the leaders tried to cultivate, or do you think it was the people there? Because
It was
that's
both.
interesting.
It
Uh-huh.
was only an 8-person team, so it was like it was hard. You couldn't really like differentiate the two.
Right. Right. Wow. So if someone's looking for a job, what are the signs that they should identify as like, oh, okay, is this in a secure environment? Because
That
like you
is a great
said,
question.
because it shows up in different ways, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people, they think attachment only like romantic relationships. But the fact that you explained it, like we project these things onto bosses that want to be like, we want to be our caretakers. Maybe we like chaotic jobs. And that's why we keep changing jobs all the time.
Yep.
So just like dating, what would you say to someone if they wanted
Yeah.
guidance on that?
I love that question. And it's so interesting because the interview process at this company was very similar to an interview process I had at a nonprofit beforehand. It took 3 months. It dragged on. There were multiple meetings with the CEOs. And that to me, I was kind of like, these are red flags. I don't know, but I'm really, I'm getting good vibes. Like I'm getting solid vibes. So I'm trying to think like what during the interview process, they were so respectful about negotiations. There was never a moment where they were like, we're not going to be able to meet this for you, or we can't believe that you're asking for that. It was like, how can we work together on coming together on this agreement? And instead of, because I'm kind of comparing these two different jobs at the same time, like the interview process might have been the same, but the negotiation process was completely different. So at this other nonprofit, the negotiation process was like, we can't believe you're asking for that much. There's no way that we can do that. They would like get back to me, but they wouldn't explain anything. Whereas at the startup, they would be like, okay, let's schedule a call. And they would literally take an hour out of their day to explain to me where their finances were, they would pull up all these like studies to show like what the market rate was in the Bay Area. But they would walk through it with me. They weren't like, here, take a look at this. It was like, no, let's review this together. So it felt like so supportive. They were totally holding my hand through the whole process. They were a partner with me through the negotiation rather than you need to fit into how this works for us. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like it was very transparent.
Yes.
And it ties back to the repair that you were talking about of actually treating you like a human. We want you on the team. It's not black and white, but let's co-create what this environment can look like together with you on board.
Well said. Well said. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And so after you were at this school, you were doing like personal development, all of that, learning all of that. How did you figure out you wanted to apply this into a coaching setting and work with different people?
Yeah. That was like a whole journey in itself. So I was interviewing more and more people for the podcast about attachment.
Yeah.
And it kind of became my favorite subject to have on my podcast. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to make the theme of this podcast for insecure attachment types. Like I'm going to try, like, I'm still going to have guests that are talking about personal growth. I'm still going to have astrology guests and tarot guests, but I'm going to kind of make it make sense for an insecure attachment type. So I was often talking about like the different fears or like the biggest emotional like emotions that the different attachment styles struggle with. So I'd really try to address those with each of the guests. And then from there, the personal development school offered their first integrated attachment coaching certification. Wow. And I immediately was like, I got to do this. And through that process, I just started to fall in love with coaching. Like it became this thing that like gave me energy. It gave me like, I would look forward to it. And I still do after any coaching session. I just had one last night in Golden Gate Park. We did like a walking session and I just came home like buzzing. I was like, oh my God, life is so good. Like, this is amazing. So that's how I decided to become a coach. And that's how I wanted to spend some time with. This has been the slowest business process that I've had. So I've had a few businesses before this.
What were your other ones?
Yeah. I had the first one was a cape company. And so I would make sparkly capes for festivals.
I wish you were wearing one right now.
Oh my God, I know. They're so fun. They're like they're so ridiculous. They're very like, yeah, they're loud. They're really fun, very royal. Yeah.
Ooh.
So I was like, this is going to be my business and I don't want to make this work. And then I realized while I was doing this cape company that actually doing social media, and then I started recording a podcast with the cape company. Those were my favorite parts of the business, like really putting myself out there, talking about just like what makes people, like people being vulnerable about their own businesses and how they started their business. And I was like, oh, talking to people about their emotions and like how they're processing is really exciting to me. So I ended the cape company. I was like a couple years after I started. And then from there, I wanted to do group coaching for podcast listeners.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I did that for a couple months and I wasn't like finding the right traction. Like I was trying to make it this spiritual group. And it was a little bit about manifestation because that's kind of where all of this work came from for me.
Yeah.
And it never felt like it was hitting quite right. And so, I put my all into it. And then eventually I just got really burnt out and I was like, I got to take a break.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to do the podcast because this is at that point, it kind of became like my love and my hobby and my creative expression.
And so were you having listeners submit questions to you and coaching them on, Oh, so it was more like a Q&A session.
It was, but no one would ever submit questions. So it was like, I was like, hello, is this thing on? Like, is anyone out there? And then as soon as I opened my coaching business for attachment, it was kind of like everything clicked. Everything felt like it was in the right place. Like connections just started coming to me. It was really, people started asking questions for the podcast. It was like, oh, this thing is on. People are out there like, hi, I hear you. So it really felt like it kind of coalesced into like, this is just the perfect fit for me.
Wow. I love that. And so when you're with a client, what are the typical challenges that you see them come to you with? Like, who is your ideal person that kind of you just jive with and help?
Oh yeah. I love working with all attachment types. I particularly love helping people that struggle with people pleasing. So whether you're fearful avoidant or running a little bit more anxious, those types tend to struggle with people pleasing. Helping people to become more vulnerable. So it's more of the dismissive avoidance side, but really getting in touch with your emotions. I really love helping clients through those things. So I'll say people pleasing, struggling with vulnerability, being in touch with their emotions in the moment, those types of things are things, boundaries. These are all things that I help people with, understanding your needs, getting to know yourself better. But I will say with clients, what I've noticed is the biggest thing is that people will come to me, and I did this on my own healing journey. Like this is something that I struggled with my sexual identity for my whole healing journey. And it took me a while to just get comfortable to talk about it and actually be open about it. And so what I find is that clients will come to me and they're really struggling and they think that they've got all, they think that this is it or this is it. And then really what it is there's something about themselves that they're not accepting. So maybe it's they cheated and they're just really, really guilting themselves for it, or they got cheated on and they're making that mean like I'm defective or I'm not enough, like I'm unlovable. It's like really pulling at their or core wounds from childhood. So there's always something that basically a client just needs to accept in themselves. And it's such a beautiful process to help someone pull it apart, question it, really examine it, and then try to love up on it. Like that's really the work that we do, right?
Yeah. And so marrying back to you, when you're like, as you're on this journey, what was that piece that
Yeah. So I came out as queer, I think in 2022. because
Yeah.
I realized, so in my healing journey, I was just like, oh, I'm struggling because I feel like I'm so attracted to women, but I'm judging myself for that. So I would
Oh,
literally be walking down the street and be like, oh my God, that girl's so cute. And then I'd be like, oh, we can't think that, like, that's not safe. And so I had to just
wow.
start to say the words, start to accept this part of myself, start to grapple with like, what does it mean to be queer? And then, which is a really interesting, like, next level piece of it, like, what does it mean to be queer and not necessarily act on it? Because I'm in a hetero monogamous relationship.
Right.
So what does it mean for me to be able to say that I am queer? I'm attracted to both men and women, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be doing anything about this in the future. Can I still identify as that? Am I queer enough? Like, can I,
Mm,
where is my place in this like sexual spectrum and this community? So
right.
honoring the fact that like I'm not out there and being like, I'm queer with like a rainbow flag and like
Yeah.
making out with everyone in the city to prove it. Like that's like in my brain, I was like, well, if we're queer, we got to go do that. Like we have to,
Yeah.
we got to, in order to be accepted. And it's like, no. There's thousands of different ways that our sexual identity shows up. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to act on them, or doesn't mean anything about us. So that was a huge part of my journey of just like accepting all the different parts of myself. And that was the biggest one that I just like hid so deep down that I like didn't want anyone to know.
Wow. Did you know that about yourself even when you were younger, or was it just
Yeah,
completely blocked out? So how did
totally
it
blocked
start
out.
coming, like those whispers or that,
Yeah,
like, I don't know, that
the
visceral
whispers.
knowing?
Well, like most people, I went to Burning Man and I was like, huh, I feel like I'm attracted to everyone here. I've heard so many other women say the same story. They go to Burning Man once, they come home and they're like, I'm full on lesbian. Like now I know. So, and I think that was one of the reasons why I avoided going to Burning Man, because I was like, I don't know what's going to come up for me. And then as soon as I
Yeah.
went, I was like, I am definitely bi. Like this is for sure for real for me. Yeah.
Wow. And so as you were evolving and kind of understanding and coming to terms with your own identity, how did that show up in a conversation, right? Like, did any
Mm.
attachment style stuff come up as you were, I don't know if you were in a relationship with your husband at the time, but as you were trying to navigate, figure that out and share that
Totally.
piece of you.
Totally. And so this is interesting because it all relates to how my attachment style got really triggered. So
Mm.
years ago, like immediately when it happened, I was like, we got to talk about this. I don't know what this means. And he was like, well, let's explore it. Like we can figure this out. And I was just like, oh my God, I
Wow.
love you so much.
Wow.
And so we tried to open our relationship. We weren't married yet, but we tried to open our relationship and I just really struggled opening it up.
Mm.
I couldn't like cross the threshold. I just like, there's something about it that just didn't feel right to me. And so we had a bunch of agreements on how we were going to open up, and an agreement got broken. And that just triggered the fuck out of my attachment style.
Wow.
And did you watch Queer Love Ultimatum on Netflix?
No, I don't. Tell me.
There's a relationship in that show. I just did a podcast episode about it, like breaking down the attachment in it. But there's a character in the show that her partner cheats on her, or doesn't cheat on her, but like her partner sleeps with someone else. And she is just like, she can't, like, she is so triggered. She can't get
Mm.
past it. And it means so much. And it has so much meaning about her and her own safety and trust. And I just watched the whole thing go down. I'm like, girl, I see you.
Yeah.
I've dealt with this too. So I would say that he and I were in a very secure relationship before that experience.
Right.
And then afterwards, my attachment style was just like bonkers. Like bells were ringing. Like it was just like, how can we
Wow.
ever repair this? Like
Yeah.
very black and white thinking, making so much meaning out of the situation that did not need to be, like, that just wasn't even true.
Right.
So we started going to therapy. My therapist was like, hey, I don't know if you've heard of Codependence Anonymous, but that might be a good thing for you.
Oh.
And, you know, at the time I'm like binging the expanded podcast and doing all this like TBM work. And I'm like, all of a sudden we were like doing couples therapy and I was like, you know, kind of resentful and like really not into it. All of a sudden I show up to each therapy session with a notebook and I'm like taking notes. She's like, something changed. And I'm like, yeah, like something's like, we got to figure this out. So I went to a Codependence Anonymous meeting, which was phenom and also so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it was just so interesting to start to learn about, you know, I was reading like Codependent No More by Melanie Beattie. And
Right.
I was like, oh, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
What's my ownership of what's going on here? And so that really just gently led into the healing of my attachment style. So,
Wow.
so that's my long-winded way of saying like, my attachment was so triggered before I came into this particular healing process.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is like, it was such a profound way to really like, I love it actually when people are triggered or when we're going through a tough time, because that's where we learn where the work is. Like, what haven't we processed? What are we still buying into? Where are we still like having fears or making meaning about something that doesn't need to be there? It's just outdated programming.
Right. And so how did you kind of come to terms with that with yourself of like, okay, I'm still attaching certain meanings and making it about me. This is the part that I'm owning. How did you reconcile that?
Yeah, it took a while. So the first step for me was the like taking a bath and doing TBM work.
Yeah.
So what I didn't realize was happening at that time is that I was building self-trust. So you
Mm,
build self-trust when your thoughts match your actions.
yeah.
And so there's like congruency between the two. I'm like pointing at my head and my body for listeners. Like when your head is matching what your actual body is doing, that is when you are actually building this self-trust or self-love. Like I think it's synonymous.
Yeah.
And so by saying, hey, we are going to rest this evening by taking a bath. And then we're going to do some journal introspection. We're going to meet a need for you of learning and discovery and personal growth. And we're going to do that every single night. And by just slowly saying like, this is what we're going to do. And then we actually did it. That created this trust within myself, because the fearful avoidant really struggles with trust and trusting other people because we couldn't trust our caregivers growing up.
Right.
So if we couldn't trust our caregivers, how on earth are we going to trust our partners? Like we have to learn how to do this. But
Yeah.
before we trust other people, we have to trust ourselves, and we have to trust that we're going to speak up for ourselves, stand up for what we need, say no when we need to. Like basically we need to be our own parent. And I wasn't. Like I was just not showing up that way at all. So much like starting a friendship, I had to start a friendship with myself that became a love affair. But it was slowly saying, hey, we're going to take a bath and then we're going to journal and we're going to do that. And then we did it. And the next day we're going to do this again. We're going to take a bath. We're going to go journal. We're going to do it. And it was just like slowly building that habit and that pattern without guilting or shaming myself for missing it or not doing enough of it, not doing it right. Like there's so many ways that our brain is like, no, but this isn't it. Like you're not actually like doing this. You're not actually helping yourself. You know what I mean? Our brains are really good at that like negative inner critic.
Yeah. And it's almost like you showed yourself that you could keep a promise.
Yes.
Reliability, security, that you would be there no matter what. And if it didn't go to plan, you would explain to yourself like, oh, this is why we didn't do it. And so I love that trust that you were building with yourself. And so were you in a relationship with your husband at the time while you were doing all this work?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes people might think like, oh, I can't heal my attachment style if it's constantly being triggered. And do I just do it alone or do I stay? Like, what was that process like for you as you were going through it, having that alone time? And just for someone that wants to know, like, how do you even navigate that of like working on the attachment style, but then is it the other person that's triggering you? And like, should you just leave?
Yeah. This is such a good question. I actually did. It's such a good question that I get asked a lot, which is why I've done a podcast episode about it. So it's really up to you to figure out what is going to best serve you. So if you feel like you're safe enough to be able to do the work on your own, or sorry, in a relationship and continue, and if that partner is giving you the space and the mental capacity, like they're like, I know you want to show up in a different way, so I'm going to let you cocoon, like do what you need to do. And I'm going to, like, every time you come out, I'm still going to be there for you. And so that's how my husband was showing up, which was incredible. If you are doing that and your partner is threatened by that, or if they are not supportive of it, if they're making fun of it, if they are unwilling to see you in a new way, I want you to think about, is this a healthy way for me to actually start to heal? Because maybe I need to do this on my own. And if you're considering like, okay, if I need to do this on my own, but I can't even imagine breaking up with this person, a great hack for breakups is just write down like all the needs that they're meeting for you. So a lot of times my partners are meeting my need for laughter, novelty, connection, emotional connection, physical connection, and honestly, a lot of validation. So I was previously like really outsourcing my validation to other partners. So make a list of like, how are they showing up for you? And then how can you meet those needs on your own? So if it's physical touch, like how can you give yourself a hug every single day? If it's emotional connection, how can you journal and connect with your emotions with yourself? If it's validation, how can you validate yourself daily? And that could be like through mirror work. So validating your presence in the mirror and saying like, okay, I'm learning how to love you. I really think your hands are beautiful. Just like trying to pick one thing that you can validate the fuck out of, and doing that as a habit. So making that a ritual. I have heard from others that like when you're in AA, I love that I'm like linking healing your attachment to AA, but it's kind of similar.
It's very similar. Yeah.
But I have heard from other people in AA that they highly recommend that you do this alone. And I've heard other AA groups say rules like don't date someone within the first year that you're getting sober.
Yeah.
I should mention I was also getting sober at the same time. I don't necessarily think that applies for everyone. I really don't. I really don't. If you do find yourself single at the time that you start your work, like maybe, like stick with being single for a little bit because you're really getting to know yourself. And then once you know yourself so well that you have no problems asking for your needs or meeting the needs of others, that's a great sign that you're ready to start dating again.
And I love that you had that little breakup tool of like, oh, what needs are they meeting for you? And then is there a way for you to self-source? Maybe you're like overextending on the external part of needing other people to fulfill those needs, but how can you give it to yourself? So I love that little exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also an update, you had a baby.
I did. Yes. In October.
Amazing. And so how has that like influenced all of your work and attachment styles of raising a child, especially when the basis is on the caretaker relationship? And what has that experience been like for you navigating it?
Oh my God, up and down. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So he's 9 months old now. He's my best teacher, like truly. So I think right around 3 months, kind of after we were through the newborn phase was just like wild and crazy. And I didn't get much sleep, and like what was up or down, like no one really knows. But as soon as we got out of that, I realized that there were still moments when I was guilting and shaming myself, like in an extreme manner. So my friend is an early childhood development teacher, and I've always kind of been jealous of that because I'm like, or envious, but because she's raising her own child, and I'm like, oh man, she's got like she knows like all the best practices, like all the she's up to date on all the research, and I'm just starting out here. I'm like, I don't even know. So she told me, we were talking, and I was like, hey, she's like, how's momhood going? And I'm like, well, I just realized that I have pretty strong reactions when things go wrong. So if I drop something, I'll say like, oh, fuck. Or if something spills, I'm like, oh my God, like I have a strong reaction that's pretty like harsh on myself. And it's not necessarily how I want to be showing up around this beautiful newborn, right? Like
Mhm.
that's not, he's so calm and peaceful. And like, I don't want to teach him that that's how he should be treating himself, because that's the whole thing about parenting. You can sit down and lecture them as much as you want about how you should be doing something. They are learning from how you are doing.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, I'm like, I got to walk my talk right now.
Uh-huh.
So I did put a little bit too much pressure on myself. So I've kind of backed off from that a little bit, but identifying the moments of like, oh, wow, where was I like this morning when I dropped the butt paste on the ground, changing a diaper? Like, how can I be so compassionate with myself for dropping it and then having to
Mhm.
clean it up so that it's like, it's just no big deal. Like I remember so palpably an experience in my childhood when I broke this water jug. And so all this water spilled everywhere. And my mom had this huge reaction. And
Mhm.
I was so triggered by it, but I never had time to process what happened,
Yeah.
because my mom, it was just very like, oh, whoops, we fucked up. And if we fuck up, we're bad. So we can't really acknowledge the fact that we've made a mistake.
Mhm.
So learning through that, I'm like, okay, so how can I help him repair and work through that moment? How can I address the trauma? How can
Mhm.
I be more compassionate with myself in the moment and say, oh, it's so okay that you dropped that. Like, you're not an idiot. Everyone does this. It's just a human thing.
Mhm.
So it's wild. That's what I'm learning. It's a practice. It is not perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, as a mom that has so much to do, so much on your plate, all these different things, lack of sleep, taking care of
Yeah.
yourself. I mean, how do you even embody that compassion and acceptance?
Mm,
Because I will admit, I used to be, I mean, I don't have any children, but I used to be critical of how parents were, if they were short with their children, if they had short temper. And then I just realized, oh, you're fucking tired. You're
yeah.
fucking tired. And so
Yeah.
it makes so much sense. And so how do you fill your own cup and not
Yeah.
get to that point of having a short fuse and creating those moments for your son?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is like, I'm so happy. And like, I think everything is divine timing, right? Like I started
Yeah.
my spiritual journey 3 years before I had him. Like I learned all these tools for self-care and self-soothing so that
Yeah.
when shit hit the fan, I was able to like I've got the tools, right? So even during my
Mhm.
birth, I was using meditation tools and breathing exercises to have an unmedicated birth. And it was
Wow.
incredible. It was like, yeah, it was a crazy experience. It hurt a lot, but it was like truly amazing.
Whoa.
So I'm like just so glad that I've had all these tools. But I remember I had one guest on the podcast. It's the owner of Scarlet Sage, and what used to be in the Mission. Now they've moved to
Uh-huh.
Fillmore Street. Incredible herbal store. She's an herbalist, and she was talking about being a mom and a business owner, that like there's just not that much time left for her. And so her
Right.
self-care happened when she would make a cup of tea. And so when she put on the hot water, that was her moment to do a full body scan. And maybe she would be standing for it. Like maybe it would be, it was just like she would meet herself wherever she was in the moment and just check in, like,
Mm.
okay, what's coming up for me? Is there anything I need to address? Where's my auric energy? Do I need to bring it in? Can I expand it a little bit? Like,
Mhm.
as soon as she hit that button to turn on the hot water, that's what she was doing. And so I heard that and I was like, okay, it sounds to me like I'm about to be really busy when I have this baby.
Yeah.
So like, where are the moments where I can check in? So for me, that means taking really mindful showers,
Mhm.
which might sound weird, but like actually being mindful of like, okay, I'm having a breath right now. I'm taking the shower to, because showers, it's honestly in the early days, it was like a miracle to have a shower. So getting into the shower, I'm taking a breath, really being mindful of my breath, and then really loving up on myself and being like, this
Mhm.
shower is to take care of you. It is to, clean yourself, but feel better. And I was like hugging myself when I put the soap on. So it was just that 5-minute practice of like having the most mindful shower and being so present has
Wow.
become my go-to. Sometimes I can sneak in a 10-minute meditation. Normally what I do is a monthly or a semi-monthly yoga nidra that's based on the changing of the seasons. And that's an hour and a
Mm.
half. I have yet to finish one of those.
Wow.
But I just know like I can tap into it for 15 minutes or 30 minutes if I'm lucky. And like, it's just, it right now isn't the season for that,
Mhm.
but it'll come back again soon. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
mindful showers.
Yeah, I love that. And I really love that you emphasize meeting yourself where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And knowing that it changes of where you are, what's currently going on, the season in your life, and all of that.
No.
And so, in this season of your life, what spiritual lessons are you learning
Mm.
right now?
Oh my God. I mean, I feel like the biggest one is to let go about perfectionism of parenting. Cause at first I was like, we got to make
Yeah.
sure he's secure. We got to show up perfectly. We got to show up like we got to use all these tools. We got to take all these classes. And
Uh-huh.
then I realized like he chose to be in this family. He chose us. Like we have a soul contract that is far bigger than me taking any sort of class to be the best mom that I possibly can. And that knowing that, I'm just like, oh, there's room for mistakes here, which
Mhm.
makes room for repair. Like as long as we just continue to keep having the conversation, like we dropped him, his first drop. Everyone always remembers like their first baby drop. So we were in a hotel in Oregon on a road trip to Seattle. My husband dropped him because he passed out. He fainted and dropped him. And it was just such this traumatic moment for
Oh
us.
my God. What happened to your husband? Oh
Oh,
my
he was
gosh.
drinking a margarita. It was his first sip. And it was so cold. He got brain freeze. And when he gets brain freeze,
Oh
he faints.
no. Oh
And
my
so it
gosh.
was just in slow motion, saw it all happening. And it was just like, my baby is on the ground. But it was so traumatic. And both of us were like just racking ourselves with guilt. Like, what could we have done in that moment? I should have moved faster. He
Oh,
shouldn't have had to sit. It was just like, we've both felt so guilty. And knowing that like we needed to continue to have a conversation. We needed to bring it up every single day to process it. We couldn't just let it go. We couldn't just hide it. We had to
mhm.
tell strangers about it. We had to tell our family members that it happened. Like all of these moments where we're like bringing it up and processing it was a
Yeah.
healing experience, to the point where like a week later it was a joke. It was like, oh my God, remember when you like had a margarita and like dropped our baby? Like, but like we have to keep processing until it becomes not a big deal. So that to me is like, okay, I don't have to be perfect with my parenting. I don't have to be perfect with my attachment style. And this translates to my husband. This translates to my relationships, like everywhere with my parents. Like I
Mm,
don't have to be perfect, but I do know, like, I do need to come up and apologize when I need to. I need to be
yeah.
vulnerable, what happened. And I need to continue to bring it up until it has no effect on me whatsoever.
I love that. It goes back to not attach meaning to it,
Yes.
right? Like just because
Yes.
you made a mistake, you aren't a mistake.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And so, where can people find you if
Yeah.
they want to learn how to work with you? Do you have any new offerings, programs, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So if you're interested in working with me, sign up for a discovery call. It's free. You can learn more about your personal attachment style and how to heal it. I do one-on-one coaching, and that's my favorite thing. So if you're interested in booking a discovery call, visit sarahcohan.com/coaching. That's sarahcohan.com/coaching. And then you can always find me on the Lit AF podcast, which is anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's all about attachment styles, healing your attachment styles, and like fun things related to attachment styles, like
Ooh.
evaluating attachment on Queer Love Ultimatum from the Netflix show. And then the last thing I would do is for anyone that is listening and you're like, oh, I would love help putting together a script for my partner where I can show up
Mm.
securely in a difficult conversation. I've got a free secure scripts for difficult conversations you can download today. And how I divided this up is through the 5 different love languages. So when we're doing,
Ooh.
yeah, it's super fun. So when we're doing repair, the love languages can help us understand how we get repair. So is it
Mhm.
physical touch? Is it quality time? Is it words of affirmation? Is it gifts or acts of service? Like, how do you feel? Like, what's the love language that really cuts to the core and makes you feel loved?
Yeah.
And so I've got like scripts to use based on that. So like, can you just hold my hand? I'd love for you to just bring me home like a little Starbucks matcha, like just little like
Aw.
easy scripts to talk with whoever in your life that you are just having a difficult moment with. So if you're interested in downloading that, just go to sarahcohan.com/free tools.
Mhm.
SARAHCOHAN.com/free tools. And you can get that today and just start showing up securely in your life.
Oh, that's amazing. We're going to put that all in the show notes because those are really good resources. And this made me think of a question. Do people come to you for couples sessions, couples coaching?
I haven't, but that is on my list. I want to coach a couple so bad. So if you're a couple, come find me because I want to coach you. This is like, I feel like this is kind of where the direction of my practice is heading, but I want to, obviously I want to try it out first. So you can be my guinea pig couple. It'll be super fun. I
Ooh.
promise. I'll go easy. But yeah, I just feel like in my own life, I've worked through the hardest attachment like type possible. And I would love to just help others find that as well.
That's amazing, especially because you alluded to that of, people thinking, do I need to be alone when I do this work, or can I still be in a relationship? And Sarah will help you navigate that of how do you emerge into this new identity? How do you create a secure attachment relationship?
Yeah.
Especially if there was a dynamic that was a little bit, not that. So
yeah, exactly.
amazing. Any last words of wisdom?
My God, I just want to say that you can change your attachment style. Like,
Yeah.
it is not a death sentence. It does not mean anything about you. Like, I hope that you're listening to this episode with just so much love and self-compassion. There's nothing wrong with it. You are not responsible for your attachment style at all, but you are responsible for your own self-healing. And it's totally possible for you to get to secure. I've seen it happen. I've done it myself. If I can do it, you can do it. Trust me. And I just wish you like the funnest time on this healing journey. And I know it can feel so hard and weighty and difficult. And I wish you the most fun that you possibly can have while you're doing this.
Oh, I love that. And a last question that I always ask every guest is, what are you doing to fill your own self-love cup and connect to the little you? I mentioned those hours, but would love to know anything else you're doing.
I love this. This question reminds me of the Page of Cups tarot card, the like one with the fish coming out of the cup.
Uh-huh.
My spiritual practice is tarot. So like that I
Same.
often, yeah. Oh, I love that. So yeah, I like to think of it in the tarot. So I just pulled this card recently, which means I got to work on this. But yeah, so what I do to fill myself up, like how I connect with my inner child basically is through laughter. I love laughing. Laughter for me as a kid was like, everyone's safe. We're all like, as long as we're laughing, everything is solid. Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's obviously just such a good coping mechanism, but I, have started laughing at my own jokes. And I know that sounds so lame, but it's such a huge healing experience to be like, I just made a joke and I'm going to laugh at it. Like, did you see how like I made that joke? Like that's how I'm like, yeah, I made that one. Like that's how I'm honoring my inner child these days.
Oh, I love it. You're such a gem.
Oh,
this is amazing. Fun fact, Sarah and I have never met each other in person. We're
Truly, yes, even though we live in the same city.
We need to plan a meetup.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. I just feel like the community that you're creating is incredible. Like the way you show up in the world is so fun to watch. So thank you for having me on. This is such an honor.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. If you love this episode, please share it. Please leave a review. If you do, screenshot the review to me at hello@lisamaycoaching.com. I'm going to leave that in the show notes and I will send you a free goodie as well. But if you love this episode, please share it with your network. I would really, really, really appreciate it. And thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you at the next episode. Bye, everyone.